Hi, everyone. I'm meteorologist Royal Norman. This is Sonoran Sky, a first alert podcast where we talk about all things under the Sonoran sky. And today, Pete Mangione's joined me. We are going to be talking with Dave Hondula, who is, he's the chief heat officer for the city of Phoenix. Does that do?
Perfect, Royal.
I've known you for such a long time, and the crazy thing that you're like the first person that started to get me really interested in the issue of heat. And you know that, don't you?
I'm honored to even be part of that conversation
Well,
with you.
because it was so much we didn't talk about heat in Phoenix, Arizona. It's heat and we deal with it, and that's what happens. But then all of a sudden it kind of turned on us and we were starting to lose people. And it was about that time I started to listen to, symposiums that you were doing and talking to you personally and doing interviews. And I think you were one of sort of the early responders, if you will, that got into this heat problem, which is a huge problem here, isn't it?
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and thanks to you both for having me on. This certainly hasn't been just a Phoenix story.
Right.
Our under attention to heat has really been true in cities all across the country. When we look at the formal plans that cities have for how they respond to all types of extreme weather, the heat sections of those plans have been really thin, if they've been present at all.
Right.
So yeah, it's certainly been a challenge and an interesting journey being part of a team of academics and our city folks trying to help advance what we're doing for heat. And we've got great support of the mayor and city council here in Phoenix, where I think we've been able to take some very positive strides forward.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that the other thing I've noticed with the heat mitigation plans is that sometimes you try things, it just doesn't work as well as you think. Sometimes you try things, they work better. A question about what we're doing now for this summer. We've got more cooling centers. We've got, it seems like, more people out with water. That, though, doesn't seem to be a final solution. That seems to be, would you call that a Band-Aid or more than a Band-Aid?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we as a city, and we see others in the region making really large investment in some of these heat relief strategies to protect the whole community, but certainly those who are most vulnerable. And now we're talking about multi-million-dollar investments, dozens of staff members from city agencies working on these programs, whereas just a couple of years ago, it would have been hard to even figure out who to bring in the room for the podcast in the first place. So we've seen transformation in this region in our investment to these types of issues, but I don't think we're at any sort of end state right now. I mean, in some sense, what's the ideal number of people to bring to a cooling center? Right now, we're working as hard as we can to get people in the door, let people know, and we appreciate the chance to be here to chat with you to share about that. But in some sense, the ideal number is 0.
Yeah.
That would mean that people aren't finding themselves in harm's way in the first place. That's an end state that feels very far away from where we are now, but it's certainly in the back of our mind. And I think to your question, at least in Phoenix, we are constantly in a state of evaluation, iteration, learning, trying to do better the next year.
Yeah, so Pete, this is one of your first summers here, and we've got another first alert coming up, and we've got some excessive heat warnings. That's kind of the thing that we deal with. Any questions that you have just coming in with Dave?
I find heat so interesting because it creates, more fatalities than any other type of weather. Do you find it a challenge that in terms of getting the word out, when we look at like visuals, videos of flooding, tornado storms, those I think are what grab people's attention. Video of something really hot, you might see people swimming or, fanning themselves. But talk about just the challenge about heat. It's a little bit harder to visually show through video to get people's attention.
I think this is one of the reasons why heat has been as tough to get on our national radar as a real public health concern. As you mentioned, produces a lot of fatalities, sends a lot of people to the hospital, to the emergency room, and the visual component is hard, and we appreciate the work of media partners like you to think about that. Yeah, I'm thinking here in Phoenix, there's always the classic shot of the plane going into the sunset with the heat warping the image a little bit. We've got that one. But then these images that you referred to, these fun in the sun types of images, academic studies show that dominates media coverage all across North America, at least. And messaging related to public health and seriousness and illness risk, those visuals are not as present. So we're seeing a picture of a kid at the pool or a kid on the beach with a pail building a sandcastle, and people might get sick or die. There's a dissonance there between those two messages that I think we need to keep working to resolve. I don't think when a 110-degree day comes through, we need to send the whole community into a state of panic by any means. But there are people who are going to be impacted. This is a serious health hazard. How do we most effectively message? I know folks are working on that right now, us included, but I don't think it's an answered question yet.
And it can strike anybody. I was reading a story about, a couple of years ago, they had the great Pacific Northwest heat wave, the heat dome that lasted a few days. And there was the saddest doorbell video you'd ever want to see of a woman who got dropped off in front of her house from a ride share. They don't really know if she wanted to walk for a burger or whatever, but she went and walked and got a burger. But she got overcome by the heat very quickly and passed away. And it's like, I don't think sometimes we understand how quick it can happen.
It can happen very quickly. We all do need to be vigilant for ourselves and those around us, whether it's neighbors, friends, family members. It can turn very quickly. And what's cruel about heat and heat illness is that one of the first symptoms of heat illness is confusion and disorientation. Mm-hmm. So whatever the right strategy might be to get ourselves out of harm's way is not going to be in the front of our mind when we start to experience those symptoms. And we read that's a tragic case you mentioned when we read cases, whether it's cases in the Grand Canyon or others that have been well chronicled across the country. The decisions that the person made who ultimately suffered seem confusing, but that makes perfect sense because they were in a state of confusion. Their body was not positioned to respond very well. So it does require extra attention on all of our parts. And this is another part of the messaging challenge for heat. Certainly some are at more risk than others, but everybody's risk is greater than zero.
Yeah, that's for sure. And so when I see that video, which is painful, and I realize that, a lot of times we talk about people in society who are really struggling as being impacted by heat. So here's the other question I have for you is I have no idea of what it would be like to be out in the heat all day, even today. I went from my air-conditioned home to my air-conditioned car. I walked 50 feet to my air-conditioned building. Most of us don't know how tough it is out there, do we?
I think that's a fair assessment. One of our great friends and colleagues at UCLA, Kelly Turner, describes this as the heat exposure settings framework. We want to think about a day in the life of different people in the city, and some people have more of an air-conditioned existence. Some don't. Some are somewhere in the middle between those two. And I think there are some interesting questions and observations to be made of how does one group understand the experience of another, and how does that impact what we might speak up about at a city council meeting, what we might choose to contribute to in society, and how do we build that empathy and understanding for the circumstances of others? The exposure that some of our outdoor workers have, our unsheltered neighbors, it's hard to fathom in some cases. And if it's hard even for the city heat officer to fathom what that's like, we can only speak about what that means for the public as a whole, and how we are directing attention and energy to what I'll keep going back to is a really important public health concern for our community.
And, in addition to the people that live here, we constantly hear the stories about people from out of town. I think they have this idea that because it's the mountains, it's cooler, but the mountains in Phoenix and around Phoenix are not that much cooler. And we constantly have people getting in trouble that are not in town. How do we get the message out to them when they're not here every day hearing the same messages?
Yeah, it's an important part of the messaging. We need to think about every step on that person's journey to Phoenix, and visitors don't account for a very high share of heat deaths. Fortunately, we rarely see that, but we do see a lot of rescue deployments, and these can be really big resource drains on our fire departments, on our paramedics. These rescues are difficult, 10, 20, 30, 40 responders at a time, at least in Phoenix, when we're struggling to meet response times as a whole community for all types of 911 calls. So if we've got a visitor in town and now we've got 40 firefighters responding to that, what does that mean for the rest of our community? So it's an important conversation to have for Phoenicians and visitors. We certainly think about the airport, the hotel, the trip to the hiking facility. And then this year, we've continued to lean into having some outreach efforts at our trailheads in particular to try to provide messaging, to try to let folks know where there are some spots to turn around that might not be the summit, how to check yourself along the way, how much water should you have at various points. We do think it's an important investment as just a piece of the total story for the whole community, an important segment here, but many other segments of the population trying to think about as well.
So I'm going to ask a question about, I've asked you about a lot, trees. And because I've been reading about, first of all, there's a very interesting, I'm sure you've seen this map of Phoenix. And it basically is a heat map. And basically, I'm going to oversimplify it here, but it shows areas that have a fair amount of tree cover are much cooler than areas that don't have a lot of trees. And some of the areas that don't have a lot of trees are folks who are struggling a little bit. So how do we, first of all, are trees a solution?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we are trying to treat trees as part of a solution to address this public health concern. I think trees, some of my colleagues talk about trees and shade are preventative medicine for the community. Is tree planting going to prevent heat deaths? We'd have to break that argument apart a little bit, but can more trees and shade cover help the daily life of so many people in the community? The walk and wait at the bus stop, our energy bills, absolutely.
Okay.
Trees have multiple benefits just in the heat domain, let alone the ecological benefits, the aesthetic benefits. So yes, we've seen the support from our mayor and council continuing to lean heavily, probably more so than ever, into trees as part of the heat mitigation portfolio.
So it is part of the solution in some ways.
Absolutely.
What are some of the other things you're looking at?
Well, just go back to your question on your observation on the disparity in tree canopy.
Yes.
That's so important, and that's to just understand where we are as a city. And the mayor has recognized this in our council. In fact, Phoenix was the first city in the country to take a pledge with a large national nonprofit called American Forests, the Tree Equity Pledge, recognizing that we do have these vast disparities in tree cover throughout the city. It's more than a factor of 10 difference in some cases. Some neighborhoods, 2 to 3% tree canopy cover, others in excess of 25%. So it's a totally different experience in the summer from one neighborhood to another. And that means that we need to, we would argue in the direction for our mayor and council, how do we lean into those neighborhoods that don't have enough trees and shade right now compared to the neighbors? And it probably takes a different type of investment, a different amount of investment, maybe a different strategy altogether, because if it was easy, it would have been done.
It would have been done, yes,
That's certainly
absolutely.
part of my learning at the city. There aren't a lot of people sitting around with, oh yeah, we could have done that easy thing, we just chose not to do it.
Yeah.
And the way that the city has been built, the way that our infrastructure exists, unfortunately, it's those places that have low tree canopy that are often the hardest and most expensive to invest in. We may be talking about a complete reconfiguration of the streetscape.
Right.
So now instead of planting a tree, which might be a few $100 proposition, now we're talking about many more zeros. But that's the I think the wise leadership from our mayor and council is let's go in that direction. Let's look for those hard project sites to help our neighbors who have least access to tree and shade cover right now.
Yeah, and any investment in those trees in those types of areas would also, I would assume, include funds to make sure those trees grew. Because you can't just plant them in Arizona.
Can't just plant them. This is almost a daily conversation we have in the heat office, and it's really important part of the story we are trying to craft together with the public. We all need to understand what it takes to have a successful tree canopy, and it's not just visiting Lowe's or Home Depot and picking up the tree for $79.99. We need to think about the soil quality. We need to think about the irrigation system. We need to think about the credentials and training of the person who's going to come and inspect and maintain that tree over the time. And it turns out across that whole ecosystem, if you will, there are real opportunities, real needs in our community to move us forward.
I find that so interesting because, I've noticed here where there's not much humidity most of the year, shade, while it's not the perfect solution, it helps a lot. I mean, the difference between being in the sunshine and being in the shade is huge, whereas other parts of the country where it's humid, sometimes that sun to shade difference isn't so big, but it makes just a big difference here.
We would say that shade is the most effective tool in the toolbox for outdoor thermal comfort or thermal safety, and we are starting slowly to try to work into the conversation more terms like the body heat load and the thermal environment. As you reference, it makes a huge difference on the body heat load. We'd be talking about something like 30 degree or 40 degree Fahrenheit equivalent difference in how the body feels. Standing in the shade in July is like standing in the sun in April or May, right? It's transformative. It's totally different. But I don't know that we've quite nailed that over time in talking about that with the community. So we have work to do in messaging the value and importance of shade. Just one more note on the value of shade. Some of the tools we use to value urban tree canopy in the country, they don't quantify the economic value of shade, which you're making the argument, and I would agree, is the number one service that trees provide in our community. So we've got work to do to understand the math and value of trees nationally.
That's very cool. So as I've known you, until this year, the number of heat deaths continued to climb, which crushed you. I know it did personally. It was because it's been your mission to cut that down. Last year, we had a small decrease in the number of people, which in some ways was really amazing because of the hot year that we had, hottest summer ever. But in some ways was still very sad because it was over 600 people. When you look at those numbers, how do you view them?
Yeah, I think you framed it well, Royal, and you're right. I mean, I remember when I first met you, first came here 10 plus years ago, we'd talk about a bad year. We might see 100 cases, and each of the last 2 years we've seen more than 600. And that's just a remarkable shift that outpaces anything we'd expect from population growth, population aging. It speaks to other types of contributors that maybe we'll talk about. So our reaction at the city has been encouragement that for the first time in more than a decade, we have not seen an increase. Maybe this is a sign that we're starting to make the right types of investments to get ahead of this challenge. But a very clear reminder, this is not mission accomplished. No. It's not time for anybody to pat themselves on the back. I mean, I think there is a lot of effort to be applauded and recognized, but the target remains very far away. And we need to keep having that conversation with our city council and mayor about what it's going to look like to move down that path. And with all the other communities in the area, Phoenix has been the only 24/7, the only city to host a 24/7 site. We've now seen Chandler come online this year with an overnight facility, so we appreciate seeing other communities really lean in. That the county has really stepped up their participation as a convener here. I think Phoenix is eager to keep leading on this front, but it can't be Phoenix alone. The heat doesn't end at the city limits, the border. As we know, nor does the need of the community as well. But yeah, I appreciate your question. I mean, it is. If that number of fatalities occurred in other types of emergency or disaster, it would dominate the news cycle all of the time. It's a really large number that we need to keep thinking about and working on very hard. In some ways, it's a barometer of success for the health of the whole community.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, now it's, you talked about cooling centers before. I imagine there are some people that could benefit from going to a cooling center on a hot day, but they may be resistant. What are a few of the reasons why people might be resistant?
Well, certainly one is just not knowing that they're out there. So we'd encourage visitors to check out the Heat Relief Network map on the MAG website, Maricopa Association of Governments. A Google search for MAG space HRN should lead one right to the map, and maybe we can have a link for viewers here of the podcast and for our listeners as well. I think there's unfamiliarity just with what a cooling center is, and maybe some fear or stigma or perception about who might be there. And I could say at the city, we take safety very seriously at all of our heat relief sites, thinking about the safety of people inside and around those facilities. And we've been really focusing on adding resources and staffing at our facilities. So if you walk into, especially one of our enhanced sites, our extended hour sites, or our overnight sites, we have people there who are specifically there to help you solve the challenge that brought you to the site in the first place. And certainly for many of our visitors, that's our unsheltered neighbors. But if you're having challenge paying energy bills, maybe your air conditioner's gone out at home, there may be city or other regional or state programs to help you. And we want to have that conversation on the spot there. So I think thinking of cooling centers not just as a box of cold air to come sit in, but maybe a place to get help and extra services could be motivating.
So as this airs, we're taping this in late June, but as it airs, it's going to be the middle of July. June has been, so it's been cooler than last year, but gosh, every June was cooler than last year. So it's going to still be a top 10 hot June for Phoenix.
Now, which is hard to contemplate.
Yes.
It feels like
Yes.
it's been so much better
Yes.
than last year, and yet we look historically.
It's top 10. It's going to be top 10 hot. It's June, and we're like enjoying it. But how is there a one-to-one correspondence between actual heat and temperatures, whether they're day and night temperatures, and the amount of, let's say, emergency room visits and things like that? Is it one-to-one, or is it a little more complicated?
I'd say it's a little more complicated. Hot days certainly have more people call 911 for heat, or unfortunately die from heat than cooler days. And that relationship exists in communities all across the world. It's very, very consistent. Even the shape of the curve looks surprisingly similar between DC and Boise and Phoenix. Some nuances, of course. But that same story doesn't play out when we compare one year to the next. We could find years that have pretty similar weather that have very different numbers of heat deaths, even in the relatively short record we have for heat deaths here in Maricopa County, which I think doesn't suggest that the weather is not important, but we also need to think about other societal factors. How are we doing with unsheltered homeless?
Yes.
What's happening with substance use in the community? How are people doing paying their energy bills? All of those factors are really important as well. And I bring a sense of optimism to this work. I like to think that if our systems are all in place and appropriately invested in, we can handle many more summers like last, or even worse. There's no reason that a hot summer has to mean more heat deaths, but it means we need other pieces of the system to be working well.
You are an optimist. I've known that for many, many, many years now. And I know that your goal would be 0 heat deaths. What are some of the things that you're going to be able to do this year that at least continue us down that path to less and less heat deaths?
And when you say you, I'm going to interpret that as the very general you of the of the city.
Of the city, but you personally have always been very optimistic that we can do something about heat.
Well, thanks. I definitely want to acknowledge the team effort at the city. The meetings are full and frequent when we're coming together to talk about heat. We have our Office of Emergency Management leads essentially a daily planning meeting to work on these operations through the summer. That whole structure didn't exist 3 years ago. I mean, it's been a huge shift in our approach here, and an unbelievable team effort. I think our continued investment in these enhanced heat relief sites, we've moved our 24/7 heat relief site this year to a location just to the west of the Diamondback Stadium at 20 West Jackson Street. Again, 24/7 cooling, open, available for the whole community. It's a safe, secure, welcoming facility. We've got space for families. We've got private spaces for health and medical checks. We've got nursing students there through the week. It's really an all-in model to try to help the community. We're seeing more visits this year than we did at our facility last year. We think we're doing a better job getting the word out.
Yep.
We have more capacity there as well. That's something that I think is going to help bring the numbers down. But I also want to give a nod to the great work of our fire department. They've had some really innovative strategies out in the field with rapid cooling of patients of severe heat illness. And we hear from people in a hospital setting who say, I'm not sure that person would have walked out of the hospital. And now they're walking on their own power. They might have had permanent impacts, permanent disability from the way you described how you found them at the scene, and now they're walking out under their own power, essentially good to go. A rapid cooling of the body appears to be making a tremendous difference. They deployed this rapid cooling strategy about 300 times last summer, and I'd like to think that that's a lot of people whose lives are much better today or are alive today than they might have been before our fire department was able to make that investment.
And that's essentially dunking someone in a bucket of ice. I mean, a big bucket of ice.
Yeah,
isn't
and
it?
it's a little bit grim to look at the pictures.
Simplest form.
Yeah, if you're in the city of Phoenix and you have a severe heat illness case right now and our paramedics respond, there's a decent chance that you'll be put in a body bag filled with ice right now. And it's a special body bag that's been customized for this mission, but we'd much rather see in that setting than the alternative.
Yeah, that's for sure. Dave, it was a pleasure to have you. It's always it's the most fascinating topic to me. That and I guess water in Arizona, two big issues here.
Defining issues, I
Yes,
would argue.
I 100%. I agree with that. So thank you for coming down. Before we let you go, give us the websites, give us where people can get the information, let everybody know where they can get the stuff they need.
I'd invite folks to visit phoenix.gov/summer to learn about the city's vast vast suite of programs and resources to help cope with our summer heat. And that might be where the cooling centers are, where the pools and splash pads are, and their hours of operation. And then for more information on the heat portfolio, the heat management and mitigation strategies, our website is phoenix.gov/heat. We have a neighborhood-based tree planting grant program open right now. Folks can apply, federally funded opportunity. We'll get you trees and professional support to get them in the ground and resources to help keep the trees alive, as we talked about. So check out our website for that opportunity and many more.
I love that. Good luck this summer, and we'll, of course, be checking in with you throughout the summer. And there he is, folks, the heat guru of Phoenix, Dave Hondula. Thank you for all you do for our community.
Thanks so much for having me.